All right, welcome back for part two. In part two, we're going to think about how we know if students are achieving desired outcomes. So remember, we started first thinking about are those critical features of classroom management in place? We just gave you a couple of examples of ways you could measure that, and you practiced using one of the self-assessment tools in your last discussion post. Once you know that those are implemented with fidelity, we're going to move on to thinking about student outcomes. If you know you're still struggling to get some of those critical features in place, we would start with developing an action plan to support your classroom implementation fidelity. So first think about getting some coaching or peer support to get those things in place. Once you know that's in place, we're going to move on and talk about how we would measure student outcomes. We've actually already talked about a lot of the ways that we would measure student outcomes. So you'll recall that we had looked at this flow chart in the supporting and responding to student behavior document. We talked about, are students still engaging in that problem behavior? If no, we're going to continue to monitor it. If yes, we're going to think about how big are those particular behaviors? Are these minor behaviors or are they major behaviors? We talked about if they're minor behaviors, we're going to use brief error correction statements. And then in Module 6, you talked about a lot of other strategies you can layer on top of that to help support the reduction of minor behaviors in your classroom. If the problem behaviors are major, then you're going to think about how many kids are involved. If most of the kids in your class or in your small group are involved in this intensive behavior problem, then you're going to think about that as really a tier 1 problem. And you're going to think about adjusting your implementation of those classroom management features to be more intensive. So you're going to provide whole group intervention by intensifying the amount of teaching that you do for behavior, the amount of reinforcement that you do for behavior, the amount of time you spend on it, the amount of reinforcement that's available for it, all of those things. If you've only got a few students that are involved in that, then we think about requesting additional supports or intensifying individualized or small group supports for students, which we'll talk about in Module 8. If we think about how we would know if all kids are achieving desired outcomes, you'll recall that in Module 3, we talked about ways of doing direct observation. We talked about event-based tally systems, time systems, and time-based estimates. There are a number of other things that we have available to us pretty easily in schools that will help us understand whether things are getting better or worse for kids as well. The page 8 in that data guide that we mentioned provides a table with direct links to a lot of these tools, so you can go there to find all of these different things. You can look at kids' grades and their work samples to know how well they're doing in class. If they're getting good grades and their work is meeting expectations, then it seems their behavior is probably not interfering too much with what's going on. It might be that their behavior is bothering other people, which is a different type of problem that you'd want to collect information in a different way from. You can look at attendance, you can look at anecdotal records, ABC charts, all of those different things that we've already talked about. One that we've not talked about is direct behavior ratings. And this is a really quick, easy tool that you can use to progress monitor student behavior over time. So I want to quickly highlight that here for you today. This is a really simple tool that looks at 3 key behaviors, and they've already defined them for you. So you don't have to go through the process of developing your operational definition. You just have to use the one that they provide for you. It measures academic engagement, respectful, and disruptive behavior. And what it does is it puts each of those behaviors on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being it's not a problem, 10 being it's almost always a problem. And your job is, after a specific observation period, is just to mark 1 to 10. Yes, that behavior was in place during this time, or no, it wasn't in place during this time. You can use this to progress monitor behaviors over time. The key is that you need to be the rater each time you use this. So this is a valid way of collecting information if you're the data collector each time. If you have a different person collecting data each time, it's not going to work quite as well, because you're going to be comparing somebody else's interpretation of the situation to yours, which isn't going to work as well. But if you're the data collector across time, it's a pretty reliable way to see whether things are getting better or worse. And it's a really easy tool that is freely available, and you can find it by going through that data guide. All right, so if we think about, if the answer to this is yes, kids are still engaging in problem behaviors, we would measure that using these different measurement systems. All right, at this point, we're going to pause for a stop and jot activity. We'd like you to pause the video, think a little bit about the data collection strategies that you used just in the last module. Write some notes in your notebook about the following questions. From the things that you put together in Module 6, what will you add or change based on the content we just discussed? Are there additional measures you'd like to think about? Do you want to think about how to measure class-wide behavior versus individual student behavior? Which of these data collection strategies have you seen others use, and which ones are you most likely to use and why? Thinking about the practicality versus precision questions a little bit. Just jot down some ideas about which strategies you're most likely to use and what questions you still have, and we'll come back in a few minutes to review. Welcome back from that activity. Remember, when you're selecting data collection tools, you really want to think about that balance between precision and practicality. That it's really important to have data that is precise enough to guide decision making, but data that's too tedious to collect isn't going to happen anyway. So we need to make sure that it's something that's practical. If you're teaching a lesson, is this something that you can collect along the way while you're also doing that? More data is not better. This is something I think we need to improve in general in schools. Only collect the data that you're really going to use to guide your decision making. If you aren't using the data to guide your decision making about the way you implement behavior support in your classroom, stop collecting it or start collecting something that will guide that decision making. And then whenever possible, prioritize the use of existing data sources. Don't make up a new tool. Don't start doing something new if you have a data source already in your classroom that would inform your decision making. So think about those things as you select tools for use in your classroom.